I was an adult when the Civil War, happened in 1991. So I was not a child at that time.
Right.
But what sticks to mind during the Civil War is just the devastation of lives and property. That would, is something that stays with me, because it's a whole difficult, and hopefully that's something I'll be talking about on Monday. Usually when there is war, you talk about victims and perpetrators, but the characteristics of Sierra Leone war made me reflect upon the difficulty really of defining who is a victim. Because when you see children, women, civilian population being abducted and forced into combat, they view themselves as victims, but society sees them as perpetrators. Mm-hmm. And I worked with both victims and perpetrators. I worked with women and adolescents, ex-combatants. So it was coming close, to them, talking with them, that I really discovered the fact that society was being too narrow in its view of victims and perpetrators, because some people who are seen as perpetrators are really victims. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that stayed with me, because again, as I said, I was working with adolescent ex-combatants, but especially adolescent girls. But let me let you talk.
No, I want to hear you talk, actually. So, as a fellow Sierra Leonean, you ultimately find yourself in the legal process that the Special Tribunal for Sierra Leone is created. How did you get to become part of that?
Initially, it was all about civil society activism. Advocating for peace, advocating for an end, to impunity, and I very much, liked working with the war-affected. So that's how I started, by engaging after the peace process, by engaging with victims of war, those in internally displaced camps, and refugees. So. You haven't started yet, right?
We have, yeah, it's on. You haven't told me a story about Jim Johnson yet. Come on.
You should have. Okay, so you want us to start now?
Sure,
proper?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so, let's start now.
Okay.
So you wipe out everything I've been saying?
Okay. So you've had a chance to get into the court system, and as a registrar, and a variety of roles. Were you there when David got started? Were you part of the David Crane, then Desmond De Silva? Where's your time frame?
I actually joined the court in early 2003.
Right.
But before that, the issues that the court was dealing with, I was working with civil society organizations like Campaign for Good Governance, but I was also involved in a lot of civil society activism, advocating for peace and justice for victims of war. So that's how I got involved with the court. I was recruited as outreach coordinator for the Special Court for Sierra Leone.
So it said, which was a grassroots program to keep the people of Sierra Leone and later Liberia informed about the court and the trial. So this was an outreach program.
Yes, it was an outreach program. And the good thing is, when I was recruited, at the time I was recruited outreach coordinator, I had significant experience working not only with victims, but also those perceived as perpetrators of the war. So I basically had a comprehensive view of the experiences of those affected by war one way or the other. And as a result of that, I was able to strategically design the court's outreach program to reach out to all segments of society in a strategic way in order to achieve the objectives of the Special Court for Sierra Leone. In Sierra Leone, first of all, but also in Liberia. And how we did it in Sierra Leone was to ensure that we engage not only with the general population, but also with targeted population, making no distinction between who is a victim and a perpetrator as a result of my experience working with both groups.
Was that difficult to be, because you are from the country, to be dispassionate as you're looking at victims and trying to draw a line, and what some people might say is a pretty unique situation where the perpetrators are in fact victims, the Ishmael BAs of the world, you know, where there's a child soldier caught up but he killed a lot of people. Yeah.
I think this question points to the unique experience I have, and literally what made me, I would say, successful as an outreach coordinator, because I was able to be dispassionate in that I had worked with both adolescents and women, ex-combatants and victims. I was able to relate with them, engage with them, and I was able to understand how society was misunderstanding this, population. So for me, it was a welcome idea really to bring that into the justice process, into the outreach process, and get people, both victims and perpetrators, rally around the court.
Did the court understand that point of view early on? The prosecutors was. It's a fairly unique process,
Yes. Well, the prosecutor is a prosecutor. They talk, from a prosecutorial perspective. And the registry is neutral,
right.
And registry supports the defense and supports the prosecution. But the difficulty, if you have lived through the war, being a Sierra Leonean, seeing the amputations, working with victims of rape and gang rape, arson attacks, seeing the kind of devastation and suffering, it's hard to be dispassionate. But as I said, I was able to be dispassionate because I understood that even those who were said to be perpetrators were really victims. So because of that deep understanding, working with these two target populations, I was able to design outreach in a way that conveyed the kind of messages that the court should convey in a transitional justice system.
Was that part of the truth and reconciliation that was going on in your country?
Yeah, we had a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. But again, that was about truth telling. It was not a criminal justice system. It was people, volunteer and talk, to the Truth Commission, both victims and perpetrators. Those who want to ask for forgiveness, they ask for forgiveness. But the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's work started way before even the Truth Commission was established, because we had we go back to civil society activism. Although the Interreligious Council does not consider themselves as civil society, but they played an extremely important role in terms of reconciliation. We also had community-based organizations who were working on reconciliation in the communities. Their work sometimes is not recognized, but it was extremely helpful, and it laid the foundation for what the Truth Commission did when it was established.
So you had a chance during your time spans in various positions at the Court of Sierra Leone to see David and Sir Desmond and Stephen and Brenda. I assume they had sort of different styles. Could you characterize those?
Yes. Well, David Crane Everybody remembers David Crane because David Crane was like the real American prosecutor, was talking tough, but also embracing the people of Sierra Leone as his client. For instance, he would say, there were statements he made when he would say, that he believed so much in his case that he would say these people would never see the light of day again, meaning those the accused persons. Well, that was important, but it kind of created some outreach challenges because we had to go out and explain to the people that just because the prosecutor says that doesn't mean that the outcome of the case is, guaranteed.
Yeah.
Exactly. So that was David Crane, and but he really, as the first prosecutor, he really inspired the people of Sierra Leone to come forward and be confident and work with the prosecutor's office. After David Crane, we had Sir Desmond, who did not like outreach very much. I mean, he liked outreach, but he did not like getting involved in outreach. He was the quiet prosecutor who preferred to just do his prosecutorial work. My comparison is in relation to outreach. And then we had Stephen Rapp. Stephen Rapp liked outreach, and Stephen Rapp, would explain a lot. He likes talking. David Crane would say very little, but then send messages. Brenda Hollis is really, very engaging. She too likes, to do outreach, to go into the remote areas and talk to people, in a very engaging fashion. Yeah. So basically, their styles, that's the difference in their styles. Crane was like, just sending these powerful messages, saying very little. And that's more or less. I don't know if you want another comparison in terms of prosecutions, but the cases, but in terms of relating with the population of Sierra Leone, that's how I would compare them.
So a couple of years ago, I think you may have been here when I interviewed all four of them down at the Jackson Center on Charles Taylor case, as it was wrapping up. What was your sense of the Taylor case? Because he was the marquee defendant, and most of the cases had been tried and resolved by the time Taylor came. Did you get a sense that was justice served, or did the time, it took such a long time that it was a difficult thing for the population to follow?
The Taylor trial?
Yeah.
Well, not only the Taylor trial, the special court as a whole, the cases, it took a long time. Because of the outreach component, it was not difficult for the people to follow because we had a robust outreach program. We had the BBC World Service Trust that had the radio programs of the trial itself. So on an ongoing basis, the trial was broadcast on radio. Yes, and it was very engaging. The people understood what was going on, so they followed the process. Because of that, they understood what was going on, and they understood why it took so long, why Mr. Taylor testified for such a long time. And as you mentioned, Mr. Taylor was former head of state, so his testimony was important to the people of Sierra Leone, and they followed it with keen interest.
When I asked the question because Jim Johnson loves to tell the story, but when Naomi Campbell came, were you part of that? Were you involved? Were you at the court at the time?
Yes, I was with the court. Yeah, I was, I believe, registrar or acting registrar. I've just forgotten the date, but I was with the court.
I was curious what that sort of created a little bit of a circus event. How did you deal with that?
It did. Well, it's good you asked that question. We knew exactly that we were going to have a media circus, around that event. So we did a lot of networking, on the security level, networking also with the media, made sure that our press officer was on top of things, and provided information, gave the media access to the trial. So we knew exactly, we were prepared for it. So we did not That's why it did not turn into any events that would affect the image of the court. So it was very well planned at all levels. And that, again, is the job of the registrar, to make sure that you anticipate these high-level events and make sure that all logistics is in place so that reporters do not have to go around running. In fact, I recall the press officer and the media, those who wanted to mount their trucks, so you have different, so it was well coordinated, with the press officer and all those who should be involved in it, the host country, the tribunal, because we were renting also at the special tribunal for Lebanon.
Right.
Yeah.
I know they've talked about it, that as much as the particular witness, Naomi Campbell, didn't add particularly a lot, but her presence drew so much attention to the court. Yes. I suspect the registrar and the press officer had to kind of explain to the whole world all of a sudden why this was happening. It was an opportunity to talk about the court.
Yes, it was an opportunity really to raise the profile of the court, but interestingly, although I would not say, that it was the most important testimony, but the world is such that they follow the Naomi Campbells of this world. Yeah. So that really, brought the spotlight on the court, and in a way, it was helpful in a way, because again, it's not the single factor, but I believe everywhere in the world, a small court like the Special Court for Sierra Leone, established in a small country in West Africa, so profiles like that, makes it known to the world.
You're sitting here today, this is 2018, and there's Stephen Rapp is here, David Crane's here, Jim Johnson is here, Brenda Hollis is here. What's the legacy of the Special Court for Sierra Leone?
Okay. The legacy of the Special Court for Sierra Leone, is wide-ranging, really. It's not limited to only what the prosecutors did. Of course, they call the shots because they bring charges. If a trial goes on, if prosecutions, take place, it's because the prosecutor in the first place does, his job, which was what happened with our first prosecutor who brought those charges. But in terms of legacy, I would like to focus on bringing justice to the people of Sierra Leone, not by, too many prosecutions, which the people would have loved to see. They would have loved to see more people indicted, but the few who were indicted were significant because, again, don't forget, context matters. In Sierra Leone, in our region, in the sub-region in Liberia, at the time these indictments were issued, lawlessness, we had lawlessness, and also this whole idea that some people were above the law. So the indictment of Charles Taylor and the former defense minister sent an extremely powerful message. That is a legacy that we cannot underestimate, because up till now, those who occupy positions of power, they know that when it comes to international criminal justice, no one is above the law. So that's one powerful legacy. But let me move away from the prosecutors and go to the defense. Another legacy in Sierra Leone that the court, contributed to significantly is making people understand that justice is not vengeance. You deliver justice to victims in the context of due process and respect for the rights of the accused. At the time the court started, the first outreach events we had, people did not even want to hear about rights of the accused. They said, where were you when our rights were violated? Towards the end of the court, the people of Sierra Leone were holding the court accountable when accused persons or convicted persons complained about their rights being violated. So I think, yes, that was a very, very, powerful legacy. Again, as I mentioned, many, trainings, transfer of knowledge happened, but we are talking here about contribution to consolidation of peace, which was what this court did by indicting powerful people. We are also talking about fundamental human rights, and due process, the respect for the rights of the accused is part of that. So I think these are, some of the lasting legacies that we will see.
What's the question I should be asking you that I haven't so far?
I've been with the court for long, maybe too long, since 2000.
Still there?
Yes, I'm still there. So, out of a strong sense of mission, to me, everything is important. So if I start telling you what you haven't asked me, would spend the rest of the day here.